You get this impression of I'm not sure if the Ramada Inn is mentioned in the story.
Mm-hmm.
It's is it next to an expressway? Yes, it
yeah.
is. Okay, I'm looking at the story. But you get this idea of a small motel next to an expressway where people are staying week to week, and you're wondering, well, why can't you move somewhere else, or why can't people somehow pull themselves up? And you get a real sense of just the constraining atmosphere of poverty in this. And I was curious if you could talk a little bit more just about people actually living in motels and hotels because the rental market's so bad, and how that just impacts both. You talk about spontaneous communities that kind of form, which is really fascinating, and small kind of kinship networks that try to help each other out. But at the end of the day, there's still a real barrier to being able to move out or otherwise live a fuller life in the community.
Yeah, I actually thought about it when you had the James Baldwin quote about how expensive it is to be poor, and I think a lot of these families who had been working class are experiencing that for the first time, and they all articulated that to me. Mike, who is a grandfather with 2 grandsons in the story, told me that he was just really shocked at how quickly it snowballed. That they all felt like they were falling into a hole that they couldn't get out of, and it's partly because it's actually pretty expensive to stay in the hotel. The rates for individuals to stay by the week, what I paid when I stayed there for 5 weeks, was $210. And then for families, it's a little bit more, and it varies sort of without warning. So some weeks the families had to pay $240. Some weeks in the summer when the tourist season was highest, it was $280. So they really sort of have to spend a lot of their cash on that, especially for families that are earning very little. There was a single mom there who was earning about $10,000 or $11,000 a year, and so that's a lot of her money. And actually, by the end of the month, she would usually have to borrow money from people. Her church helped her out a lot. She went to food banks to get food. She lost her food stamps at some point too because she was earning a little too much. So she had to really rely on the food banks and the soup kitchens and her church. So she, every time she turned around, every time she got a paycheck, the bulk of it went to this weekly rent. And actually, when you think about how much you're paying, if you pay $240 a week, let's say, you're paying about $1,000 a month on average for a room, basically. And it's a room where you can't cook very much food. It's a room where you can't store bulk items. So even if you could afford to go to Costco, you can't really keep that amount of food or goods there. You can't do anything else in your home. So if you had an opportunity to pick up extra work and do it at your house, you'd have trouble finding the space to do it. And you can't get around very easily because it's in the suburbs where you are near a highway. There's actually a state highway and then the interstate, so it's not very safe to walk. And there's a bus system in the county, but it doesn't run very well, and so you end up taking 2 hours to go 4 miles if you try to rely on the buses. And actually, one of the things that happened is that a lot of families, they often had old cars. Their old cars broke down, and they couldn't afford to get them fixed right away. So then the amount that they would have had to spend to fix the car kept growing and growing and growing. A lot of families would let their plates expire, and then that was okay until the year passed, and then they would have had to have new color tags for their car, and so they knew it would be more obvious, so they were afraid if they drove around they'd get tickets. People did get tickets driving around, and they were tickets they couldn't pay, which of course makes the price of the tickets go higher and higher and higher. So that's sort of the traps people fall into, and a lot of people just end up abandoning their cars, which means they can't get to work on time, which means that they might lose their jobs or get in trouble at work, which puts them at jeopardy for getting a raise down the road. So all of these things really compound, and they've really started to fill it in a hotel because they had to eat boxed macaroni and cheese and anything that they could cook in a microwave, which is more expensive than it would have been if they could have sliced up potatoes at home and cooked them on the stovetop. So, those things, all of them combined just to really wear people down, and anybody who had savings spent it down. Anybody who had a job struggled to make it to work on time. Anybody who was in school struggled to get their schoolwork done. So it was really sort of, they started to see how compounding poverty is, and I always